Howdy Connection Group leaders, happy Thursday. I hope y'all are having a great day. I just wanted to do this in front of a window. I'm hoping we're about to see a downpour. You might see a flash of lightning here in the next few minutes, but it's gonna end up being kind of a pretty day. Man, all this rain's been great too, by the way, right? It's kind of a nice deal. So we're starting the book of Philippians today. I'm excited to study Philippians. That's always a great time. It's encouraging, it's fun. You probably heard somebody point out to you that Philippians is the one church that Paul didn't have to correct in any way. He was just bringing a word of encouragement, not only to them about how they were living, but also a word of encouragement about what he was enduring, which is what we're seeing here. So let's talk about it. The first thing we want to see is that God really is not finished with us. Okay, right out the gate, verse 5, he says, hey, I want you to know that God is not finished with you. The work that he started in you, he's not going to finish, or he's not going to be finished with you until the work's completed. This should be a really big bit of encouragement for people in our church. And really, there's not just two types of people, but I would say let this be an encouragement for those in your group who are struggling and genuinely believing, man, I'm never going to be able to size up to what we preach about all the time. And this verse is proof of that. Listen, God is the one who called you to himself in the first place, and he's not going to continue to work on you until you are the believer that he wants you to be. He is going to continue to sanctify you. That's the encouragement here. Is yes, there are things that he asks us to do and ways that he wants us to walk in obedience, and we ought to, right? But he's the one that's tweaking our hearts and changing our mindsets and making us more and more fearless. And part of that is done when we obey, but nonetheless, he's changing us. And for those that may be in the group and are saying, no, I don't want to live that way, let this be a little bit of a loving warning shot from God, right? Hey, he who started this good work in you, he's not going to finish with you until it's completed. And in other words, God is going to have his way in your life. This is one of those times when I like to point out to people, hey, I've read the story of Jonah and the great whale. Like, I know how that ends. God's going to win. Now, somebody might point out, Jonah didn't end the best way. Like Jonah still hadn't changed. And you're right, he hadn't. The book intentionally ends in such a way where we don't know how it finished up. But we do know from this, God does not stop working on his people until we're done. And so truly, let this be an encouragement for those in your group that might be struggling and just feeling like they can't ever do anything right. Reassure them the Lord loves you, number one. Number two, he wants you. And number three, he's going to keep working these things in our lives out so that we will change. It's a beautiful, beautiful promise. Number two, we ought to look at the fact that we need to be willing to share the gospel no matter what it costs us. And in this case, in Paul's case, it was Paul was willing to give anything, whether it was physically or socially. And I say physically just because he's already endured shipwreck. He's already endured several beatings. He's been in jail multiple times. His life has been threatened on multiple occasions. He's on his way to a rumble in the jungle with Caesar himself, and that's going to cost him his life. And yet Paul says, man, I'm willing to do this. Why? Why? Because Jesus is better. Hold that thought. We're going to come back to it. But he's also endured a lot of just social issues, right? Like people that used to think that he was just incredible amongst the Jewish people now despise him. Other people who have never met Paul are actively trying to compete with him just because they're threatened by him, whatever. And I love this little section in here about how people are sharing the gospel from the wrong mindset, but he's still rejoicing because they're sharing the gospel, right? That's a pretty beautiful thing. That would also be an example of God's going to have his way in our lives, right? Like those people that are sharing the gospel for false pretenses, eventually God's going to flip the switch in their heart too, which is pretty cool. So that's why Paul is rejoicing. But we got to be willing to share the gospel no matter what it costs us. That's easier to say than it is to obey. I recognize that entirely. And this is true of me, even as a pastor and a seasoned believer. It's hard when we know that following Jesus is going to cost us. But it's worth it. And Paul's going to show us why. The next portion says to live in Christ and to die is gain. for those of you that are teaching teenagers and young adults and college students, there are a small group of people, and certainly the enemy, absolutely the enemy, that will try to use this concept in this passage here as a justification for suicide. And I'm dealing with this concept in a couple of different places right now. So part of this is why it's on my mind. But let me just say this. No, it's not a justification for suicide. And the way that we can know that is the way that it ends, right? Paul says, yeah, I would rather die and go be with Jesus because Jesus is better. But I know that I need to be here. And the reason why I need to be here is because God is using me and has a plan for my life. And so I want to submit to that plan, even though I know it would be better for me to die, because then I don't have to suffer anymore. Then I don't have to be in jail anymore. Then I don't have to struggle with all this stuff I'm struggling with anymore. It would just be better. Paul talks in a couple other places about just some physical issues he has even. Well, there's people in our church that struggle with all those things, whether it's, and I'm just sick of how I'm getting treated, or life is just not fair, or life's not fun, or I struggle and I just want to go home. Because Jesus is better, and we recognize that. But let this be the encouragement. Again, number one, God's not finished with you yet. He wants to use you, and he's going to keep changing you both inside and out and making you more like him, so that's worth it. But number two, he has you here for a reason. He is using you to advance the kingdom. This doesn't just apply to Paul. God is using everybody to advance his kingdom, and you are on planet Earth for a reason. So let that be an encouragement to you. Stick around. He's not done. He wants to use you in magnificent ways. And then finally, the reason why heaven is better, it's because Jesus is there. Jesus is better. And again, that's easy for us to say when life stinks, but we need to remember that Jesus is better when life is awesome. That's when we forget that, right? Like, he really is the most important thing in our lives. He's the thing that's most worth our time to pursue, and he's the thing that's most worth our time to share, because he's better than everything. So he's who we want to trumpet and triumph in and just celebrate. And that's what we get to do on Sunday. I can't wait to do that with you. Guys, we love you. Enjoy the rain. We'll see you Sunday. Bye.